If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. I've worked for a company who does contract work exclusively for the US Forest Service in surveying areas for invasive plants, and we basically travel all over the forest in SoCal, even in areas that are off limits to the public. I have many stories to share that fell into the category of being creepy. I have my story to tell. So my crew at work is basically between 5 and 6 people every day. The same people for 10 hours a day, 4 days a week. Like I said, we sweep through the forest by combining a search team looking for invasive plants and putting down a GPS tracker on their location to be removed. I remember one day when I started, we came across this abandoned day use area where there had obviously been some sketchy stuff going on. Now we used to park the car in a turnout across from it and eat lunch, and several cars would drive into the area over the curb. Because the main driveway was blocked with a big metal gate, people got out of their cars, some walking their dogs, some taking pictures, some for picnics, and some people just carried stuff and disappeared into the area. For a while, we had kind of skipped over the area because, according to my boss, no invasive plants have ever been tracked in the day use area, so we didn't go there. Nevertheless, it was still sketchy as hell. We would constantly drive by it and see people dumping things. What ended up happening was the crew got called to another part of the forest for a while, and we were probably out of that area for a few months, only coming back sporadically. But we drove down that same road every day and still saw cars parked there and stuff being dumped. So one day, my boss tells me that we need to walk the almost 7-mile stretch of road that day. He asks for volunteers to cover the sides of the road, which cuts through a narrow canyon, only 500 feet wide. The day use area was on the right side of the road, so I volunteered to go right with my other 2 workers, with plans on checking the area out extensively. We took our tools with us, which consisted of hoes, some folding saws, and pulaskis, which are basically a 2-headed axe with a pick on the end. Additionally, I was wearing my knife on my belt. So we started walking into the day use area, and I'm scanning for all signs of life. There's a bunch of abandoned stuff laying everywhere, like refrigerators, storage shelves, and broken glass everywhere. There's also several holes in the ground that were perfect squares, cut into the concrete, and they gone down pretty far. They weren't that big though, probably 4x4. So we kept walking back, and I see these rags scattered on the ground. Some have red stains on them. They're next to a big pile of dirt that's covered with stones and half a skateboard sticking out of the ground. There's a wooden cross nearby, and I'm thinking, is this some kind of grave? So I call the other guys over, and we read the writing on the skateboard, and it was a burial site for something that was once called a diamond. I couldn't make out the years on it, but the grave's big. One of my co-workers thought it was an animal grave. I chalk it up to being something that a dog owner's left there. We kept pushing through, and I'm seeing tons of invasive plants everywhere. I'm reading off the names to co-workers who's putting them into a GPS unit when we see a building tucked into the corner of the day use area. So we walk back there, and there's a tiny opening between the rocks, barely noticeable from the road, and it turns out to be a whole nother canyon branched off. We check the map and make sure there is a canyon near here where invasive plants could be coming from. The GPS shows nothing. We have to check it now. It's about the size of half a shipping container, clearly abandoned. The door is slightly opened. I reached out with the hoe and pried it open. It's pitch black. My co-worker takes out his phone, and there's some really weird stuff in there. There was tons of weird magazines on the floor, pillows and blankets, as well as children's clothing. I back up and start walking back to the main road. There's clothes everywhere belonging to adults. This is scaring the life out of me. I'm not about to go in there. When I get back in view of the road, there's a truck in the day-use area that's not none of ours. I don't see anyone using the picnic areas, and the weird thing is, the truck had driven over the curb to bypass the gate, and was parked in a secluded area. It didn't look like anyone was in the truck or around it, and I stay in the clearing waiting for my co-workers. When we finally got to the spot, I point out the truck to them, and they said he's probably hanging out in the old bathroom building which is off to the side of the road. They wanted to go in and check it out. I sure as hell don't want to leave them and be alone, so I follow. The building was kind of V-shaped, with male and female bathrooms on the end and a storage in the middle. They go into the men's room, whose door had literally been kicked down by someone, and apparently there was tons of illegal magazines all over the floor, tons of weird pictures of things that I'm not even going to say, with pillows and blankets. There was a small hole that had been cut into the wall leading into the small storage room. It sounded like they were literally going to try and crawl into the room for the bathroom to check it out. At this point, I was standing outside the building on the other end of the door to the storage room, and I'm not kidding you, I hear the doorknob jiggle. At that moment, my co-workers came running out of the bathroom, and one of them grabs his knife and brings it up. He quickly grabs another tool and bashes the door handle and the area around the door to the storage room. 15 seconds later, we see a man sprint out of the bathroom and run back further into the woods. Apparently, this is what happened. One of my co-workers stuck his head through the cut hole in the men's bathroom. It's pitch black. He uses his phone and sees there's a man there alone in the corner, boxes lined up with pillows and blankets on the floor. It startled him so much that he ran out too, as well as the other guy. We radioed up some of the hotshot firefighters who had a station nearby for support, and they sent a few guys and literally took a chainsaw to the door, set up a floodlight, and the room is filled with boxes and photos of really bad stuff. We told them where the man ran off to into the other building, so they went to check it out as well. Opened the door, floodlights on, and the creepiest thing out of the whole experience was that the building actually went back further into the dirt at the adjacent hills. The firefighters checked their photography maps, and sure enough, there was a bunker, and nobody went further into that place. Now, I've been homeless a lot, and I've lived in some distant families' land where they have an old cabin upon slits. Due to the local woods flooding heavily sometimes, I spend a good amount of time in this old cabin. There's a wood stove and a swing hanging from the porch. I use that as a bed sometimes. Overall, it was an okay place, and it wasn't too far of a drive from town to get food. You just have to tolerate the half-mile walk to your car. So anyway, one day I'm out walking around the woods, and in a smallish clearing in the path, I see easily a good 50 to 60 dead geese. Every one of them is mangled in horrifying ways. Necks ripped off their bodies, blood everywhere, feathers for the life of me, bones sticking out of the dirt. It looks like a genocide. The ground is dry and there's lots of dust, but I saw no prints and there was no other evidence of anything ever being there, aside from what I can only assume was some sort of explosion. I also found a torn open old backpack with a great deal of candy wrappers thrown about. Way too mouldy to identify or know anything of. I decide to turn back to see if I can grab a camera when I start hearing this god-awful shrieking sound, as if it was coming from every possible place. I took off pretty fast when it started, and to this day, my best guess is that it's a massive fume of toxins, or maybe it was from some massive animal. I really can't get a rational explanation here, and it really scares me. A mate of mine and his cousin decided to go on a motorbike trip around Australia. Unfortunately, on the second day, the cousin's wallet falls out of his back pocket, and it was only hundreds of kilometers later that he realizes. Now, the two of them were forced to rely on only one guy's money, since all of the bank branches refused to give out money to my cousin with no ID, which of course is in his wallet. Matters were complicated later when they filled up with non-sniffable Opal petrol, which buggered up their engines and required them to pay a mechanic to fix it. The end result was that they had almost no money, and any money left had to be rationed for petrol. They're eating 2-minute noodles for every meal and sleeping rough. In some towns in the middle of nowhere, they would go to the local pub just for warmth and company, but couldn't afford a beer. So one night they stopped at a town that consisted of a handful of houses, a caravan park and a hotel. When they went into the hotel, they met all of the locals, including the local cop and the owner of the caravan park. Mr. Caravan Park started talking with them and was getting pretty chummy because he knew that his was the only place offering accommodation and camping in that area that was legal due to the presence of crocs. Realizing that if they planned on camping illegally, they could get tipped off to the police, they decided to sneak out without anyone realizing and head out of town. They were hoping to find some shelter, but it was featureless red dirt as far as the eye can see. After about 20 minutes, they came to a bridge and hid their bikes under it to set up camp, even though they're in the middle of nowhere. Roads, trains would come by on a regular basis, and were loud enough even from a distance. The next morning, they went back to the pub to get water and noticed some old photos on the wall. One of them featured a very large crocodile. In the background was a bridge that they were sleeping under. I was on summer break and went camping with my friend and his parents. We went to the lake during the day and did the s'mores thing at night. His parents shared a tent while my friend and I had our own. I can't remember where our campsite was, and I'm not really in contact with my friend anymore. But 15 years later, I'm assuming it wasn't the safest place to go camping. Here's why. I woke up sometime in the early morning at like 3 or 4 AM and immediately saw a man's face looking in through the tent that he had unzipped at the door, sticking his head through with this absolutely insane look on his eyes. With wild hair, I'm literally stiff with fear I can't do anything but look at the man, who's very slowly moving his head from left to right, as if this isn't bad enough. I guess my friend could hear my breathing loudly or something, because he woke up too, having the same reaction as me, just laying there looking in terror at this mysterious man. And I'm not certain for how long he was actually sitting there, but it felt like it was hours, moving his head back and forth. At some point, we heard a noise close by. Oh God, there's more, I think to myself, literally shaking. But apparently, it's not with the man. He quickly disappears a couple of minutes later. We got out of our tent and woke up his parents, but the guy was long gone. What's more crazy about this is the guy didn't even blink. He literally just shook his head from left to right, staring at us, shaking. I've never seen anything so terrifying in my life, and I really don't want to again. This happened about 15 years ago. I was 6 and my sister was 11. We were camping with our grandparents on a campground we went to often, in a tent trailer we always used. We had been there for a few nights, having no problems at all. If you're not familiar with a tent trailer, the kind my family owns has 2 queen-size beds that fold outwards off the trailer, and we're somewhat suspended. We have a tarp over our head attached with hooks underneath to the base. Now in the middle of the night when we're all asleep, a man come into our campground and unhooked some of the tarp under my bed. He reaches his hand in and starts feeling around. I woke up to the feeling of someone touching my hair. Assuming it's my sister, I don't react for a few seconds. She suddenly jerks up, and we both realise there's a hand wrapped around her arm, and that a man's whispering, "Shh." Hysterically, we both start screaming for our lives. My sister and I start bending his fingers backwards, hoping to make him stop. My grandpa then wakes up for our screaming and figures out what's happening, and my grandfather furiously ran outside, but no one's there. The man's gone. Now thank God this was our last night there, and we were leaving in the morning. Needless to say, we would have left anyway. I'm just so glad that my granddad actually woke up and was able to help us. If it was just us there alone, I would have hated to think of what could have happened. Me and my father always went fishing. Heck, it's something we still do now. We live in the backwoods community, so nature's always around us. I've later moved into the city life, but whenever I'm staying with my mum and dad, I always like to go doing hunting or fishing with my father. Now from being out in the wilderness for so long, you truly get used to what's around you. My dad, being so seasoned, always had an explanation for something weird that would happen. However, there was one time something happened that was so weird that neither of us could explain it, even to this day. So I was 18 at the time. We were doing some night fishing in a lake, something that I absolutely loved to do. We're having a great time, just talking about life and things in general. I was actually planning to move to the city around that time, so we spent a long time talking about that. And my dad was saying that maybe when I'm older I should come back to the forest and get back to nature, but he understood the opportunities that moving out into the city offered me, and I was really excited. Now as we're saying this, the moon seems to be shining really bright. It was cloud covered at first, so we didn't really see it. As we're sitting there talking, something seems off. We both stop talking at the same time, and I see almost a blue glow on my dad's face. I reach down to see if I have a torch on, and then I notice it. all of the water around us has a very light blue ambient glow. And I'm not kidding you, the entire lake seemed to have this glow to it. Everything around us was silent. I look at my dad, and he's just as scared as I am. We don't say a word, and suddenly, we hear an explosion sound in the sky. I'm terrified. We both jump to the deck, and stay cowering for what feels like an eternity. It's probably only about 10 seconds though. We both slowly raise our heads, and the light's gone, and there's no clouds in the sky. We quickly pull the boat into the harbour, and get going home as quick as we possibly can. And to this day, I have no idea what the hell happened. I don't believe in the supernatural or UFOs, but I really think this has to have been something from out of this world. The closest thing I can think is that something carrying some kind of voltage dropped from the sky into the water, explaining the explosion sound, but it doesn't add up. My dad thinks it might have been something extraterrestrial, but I don't know. All I know is that it scared the life out of me, and I've never seen anything like it. I was a semi-driver at the time. I was at a small truck stop up in Maine. It was midwinter, cold. I was trying to get some rest before driving home. I fell asleep quickly as I've been awake for probably 29 hours, and nobody was around as far as I could tell. I slept well, until I was awoken by the sound of yelling. It wouldn't have been the first time that some idiot was being weird to a woman, so I sit up to figure out what's going on, and I see two younger guys standing with their faces against the glass staring at me. They have black clothing on. The second they notice me, they sprint off, but I fell asleep thinking I was hallucinating due to exhaustion. When I wake up the next morning, there was a head of a deer or a moose or something placed next to my truck. Blood prints in the snow leading into the woods. I still have no idea who they were or how long they've been staring at me for. About 7 years ago, I worked at a southern style restaurant. I'm originally from Alabama, but I live in the Midwest near Chicago. I was working one day, and a man, woman, and their daughter came in to eat. I waited on them, and they're really nice. They're probably older, probably in their 60s, while their daughter's probably 30 something. They noticed my accent and stated that they're from Alabama, as well as had moved near Chicago for work. Not knowing many people in the area, it's kind of nice to have a familiar accent as it makes me feel like I'm home. After I waited on them, they left a pretty decent sized tip, so it made it all the better when they come in. Over the next few months, they started coming in a lot, and I mean a lot, probably 3 or 4 times a week, and would specifically ask to be sat in my section. They tipped well, so I don't care. They talked to me about all kinds of things, although I was very careful not to reveal any information to them. Now, they told me that they saw me driving my Jeep, and they had a present for me. They gave me a decal and said, "It's a Jeep thing." I was rather embarrassed to say the least and didn't want to put it on my car, so I didn't. Then they come in and asked me why it wasn't on the back of my Jeep. Now this is where things get strange. We're open for Easter. I was working and they come in and confronted me asking if I wanted to go to lunch with them the following week. I hesitated but was young, about 22, and felt pressured to say yes. They asked me for my phone number, and against every instinct I had, I gave it to the dad, and it wasn't a good feeling. A couple of days later, they call me and I don't answer. I let it go to voicemail, although the dad left a minute-long voicemail rambling about this or that, wanting to meet up. They came in the next day and asked if I want to meet at the restaurant. I said, fine, thinking they're going to leave me alone after I do it this once. I was young and dumb. Upon arrival, they didn't get out of their car. They told me to get in the car and we would go to a different restaurant. I got a really bad feeling in my stomach. I knew I didn't want to get in the car with them. Instead, I said I'd meet them at the other one. The dad started begging for me to get in the car. Being polite, I said no thank you, I'ma drive. I ended up going to the restaurant in fear of me leaving and standing them up, and it affected my job. So I went to the other restaurant after the dad begged me, and finally gave up. When we got to the other restaurant, he was continually talking about how he wished I would have listened, and went with him and got in the car, and was incredibly fixated on this. The daughter didn't speak, the mother didn't speak either. The whole experience was the dad telling me that he was upset I didn't get in the car with them and should have listened. Finally, I finished and left as quick as I possibly can. He said to me to get lunch again tomorrow, but I said I'm out of town. The next day, I had 10 missed calls from the dad, back to back. Each of them had a voicemail that was 3 minutes long of him just breathing, grunting and moaning. After I was terrified, I completely ignored them. Luckily they backed off and left me alone, but still come in to eat, although they didn't ask me anymore. I eventually stopped working there out of fear of seeing them again, because the other times I saw them I was too busy to actually speak to them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I gotten into the car or if I kept on seeing them. They were not normal, and I can only assume their intentions were not good. Back when I was 18, my mum had been working in the garden, so she was exhausted and went to bed early. It was winter, so it got dark early. I knew I'd be the only one awake for the next few hours until her partner got in from working at 4 AM. I went about my usual nightly routine and get ready for bed. Now the house has 2 floors and my bedroom was on the top. After I smoke, I went upstairs and continued watching whatever. About an hour later, I decided I would have one more before going to bed. I just got finished with that one, and I'm about to head downstairs when my phone distracts me. I sat back on my bed and concentrate on that. When a minute or two elapses, I hear a loud banging from downstairs. I thought to myself, it's just my mum's partner coming home. Then seconds later I realised I didn't hear the front gate open. I didn't hear the taxi pull up outside either. And I didn't hear the front door open. My cat is on the bed next to me and it's not him. So what was that banging sound? I grabbed my taser, which looks like a Nokia phone, and stick it in my dressing gown pocket, going into my mum's room. She normally is such a light sleeper, but because she's tired from gardening, slept throughout the noise. I wake her up and tell her that I've heard something. She gets herself ready and grabs a small metal pole, and we head downstairs. I insist on going down first because, in all my fairness, my mum is like 5'6", 130 pounds, and has multiple sclerosis and is holding a flimsy metal pole. I figure it's better to tase someone. Now, looking around, everything seems to be fine. However, the last room we check is a bedroom, next to the bathroom. And there, I find that the window that sits just above the bath is wide open, and some of her shampoo bottles are on the floor. It's like 2 a.m. We're really scared now, and my mum calls her partner to say something's happened and someone must have tried to break in. His response? It's probably a fox. Go to bed, you're paranoid. 5 minutes later, the police arrive with 4 cars and dogs. They look around, come into the door asking obvious questions. After doing a walk around the house, they come back again and ask the usual, saying, do we usually keep our plastic garden chairs under the bathroom window? Of course we don't. The police advise us that there's a dodgy gang about that's been breaking in and attacking people, and they must have used the garden chairs to help them get in. The police also advise that a house a few streets over has just been broken into and someone was hurt. The thing that freaks me out most about it is that, had I not got distracted by my phone, I would have headed straight down there at the exact same time they're in my house. A few years back, I was driving to party with some friends from my house by myself. They lived about 30 minutes away, and it was around 10:30 and pitch black. So I'm driving down the road, and I see a man on the side of the road with a small white sack. Down the road, there's a white car with the door open. As I pull up, I roll down the window. He says his car broke down. His hair is greasy and long. He looks like a lot of residents that are in the area, farmers and mechanics, etc. So I pick him up as he wasn't much bigger than me. He's about 37. I say, where are you going? And he says, in town. And away we go. I start talking and he's a bit weird, so eventually I stop bothering to make conversation. Every so often, he shifts position and there's a clatter from the back. He said he needs to arrange a ride when he gets to town, saying, can I use your phone? I give it to him, reluctantly because it's a brand new iPhone, and he calls up someone and starts saying he has some GPS for sale. His bag shifts, and I see there's radios in the bag. The broke down looking car he said he owned was a car he'd just stolen the radio from, and he's trying to sell them while we're in my car on the phone. I say, hey dude, when you're finished with your call, I need my phone back. Cool as a cucumber. I want to make him think I'm really stupid, and I'll take him wherever. So we get to about 10 minutes from where I'm going, and I know I have to get rid of him. So I'm like, hey, brother, I need to make a call really quickly so I can get in my friend's building. He reluctantly hands the phone back to me, and I make a fake call quickly and chuck it in the door pocket where he can't get it. So I ask him again since we're in town, and he says, whatever, you're gonna drop me off here then. I scan him quickly to see if he has a knife. So I slow down and stop when I'm satisfied he doesn't have one, and say, here you go dude, up the corner. He's like, nah man, we're gonna keep going. I finally lose a call and scream at him to get out now. He then reaches for something in his pocket, but I manage to push him out. I squall my tires and pull out of there and immediately call the police. A couple of days later, I see a piece in the paper saying they caught him and he's wanted for murder. For a bit of background, my sister and I live together in a house that our parents own. At this time, we live with 2 people we found off flatmates. We both still live here, but we asked the other 2 to move out because they seemed unfamiliar with the process of locking doors, and our personalities clashed a fair bit. For an idea about the layout of the house, my room is next to the front door. There's a kitchen and living room in the middle near the back door, and my sister's room at the back of the house. To get to the backyard, you have to either go through the back door through the house or go outside. One day, I was home on an off day, enjoying the peace and quiet of having the house to myself. I listened to music, did some cooking and treated myself to a bit of pampering. I realised I'd run out of face wash, so I went to my sister's bedroom to see if she had any. We used to have fights as a kid over who used whose makeup or whose top was whose, but I figured since we're grown adults she doesn't care. I know this information seems irrelevant, but it all makes sense. Now my sister was a manager at a restaurant, so her coming home really late or not at all was standard. Between a lot of work hours and socialising, I didn't see her that much. But on this night, she came home when I was already tucked in asleep. The next morning, I woke up to a message from her in the early hours asking if I went to her room. There I am thinking, how did she know that? So I answered yes. I was looking for the face wash. Oh, that's alright. I did ask if you were okay, but you didn't answer at all. Also, close my bedroom door next time and keep the back door locked. It was wide open this morning. So obviously, I'm completely freaked out by this message. I had only gone into her bathroom during the day when she wasn't there. I told her that I never went into the bathroom during the night. Of course, she thought I was messing around in all seriousness, but I told her this is not the case. I asked her if she knew the other 2 housemates were home last night, just covering all bases. She said neither of their cars were home when she got there, and they confirmed this by saying they stayed at their partners' houses that night. If it wasn't me, and it wasn't one of the others, who was sneaking around going through our house in her room? As I said earlier, the housemates had a bit of leaving the doors unlocked at night, and other weird habits. But no one was home. Since we live in an area that isn't the greatest, locking the doors has always been a thing that we double checked now. Not long after this happened, they moved out and a couple of close friends moved in. They were still really good with locking doors and making sure everything was safe. But 2 months ago, we saw a really suspicious van parked outside, and things started getting stolen. And all of these were stolen on the night that the gate to the garage wasn't locked. My house is definitely a target for creepers. I distant hike when I can. Sometimes this means getting up early, staying out late, to get as many miles in as I can. Sometimes walking in the pitch dark with a low light headlamp seems spooky. I grew up in the wooded areas. I've slept under a canopy of stars more nights than I can count. I've trekked literally thousands of miles of trails, riverbanks, lake shores, ridge bottoms, bogs and creeks. I've hunted the game. I'm establishing this because this is very important for you to understand. I've seen, heard, smelt all about this region in terms of what it has to offer with wildlife. My scariest experience so happened at about 04:30 in the morning. It was late spring, so the first morning light wouldn't be visible from the treetops for another 30 to 45 minutes. Another hour passed until sunrise. I was on mile 5. I'm in a low bottom that's wedged between the two steep ridges. The trail I'm on was narrow, muddy, and completely hemmed in by a thick underbrush, young maple and oak. I'm confused, but focused on a small light with my headlamp, and I did hear what I think I did, a loud crack. I freeze solid. This is a part I'm having trouble describing. 04:30 in spring times means I am the only thing making noise. No birds chirping, nothing. It's literally dead quiet. Mid-step I froze. Now, it's just me and my fight or flight reaction. The thought instantly flashes in my mind as I stood there bracing myself into silence. If I hear that again, I'm turning round and leaving in a hurry. Why? Because that sound was not a branch breaking, nor a deadfall. It wasn't a widowmaker. I was damn sure that whatever did that done so intentionally towards me. Hearing it twice, well, God. To describe it as best I can, it sounded like a big piece of wood being violently smashed against a tree. More like a baseball bat, to be honest. The distinction in my head being that this sounded like a crack, not a thud or thump, as I have described it as an explosion. It's such a horrifying sound to me now. So I stood there, completely spooked. I realised the soon to be worst part of my situation. I knew where the sound come from. I knew where the trail went. In about 30 yards. I was gonna come to a 180-degree turn and start up the ridge going away from the creek. This meant as soon as I got the courage to move towards the noises, I was gonna have to turn back to it and get up that ridge. I'm nervous now. My head somewhere between meth find murder and Bigfoot. Minutes pass, I just breathe. With the fog misting up on my glasses, and there's nothing. Dead quiet. I've got about 30 minutes until first light. I crank up the headlight and start to slowly creep to the 180-degree turn. When you wear a headlamp in the woods at night, every branch can cast 1,000 shadows. Without moonlight, there's little help. I get to the turn and quickly make the bend. I'm moving pretty fast now, trying to be quiet, taking tiny shallow breaths. Then I smell it. A stench hits me that I can't describe. Imagine being dead, rotten and cold and wet. I've actually worked scenes with humans who have expired in the past, and this was worse or similar. I kept walking fast. By the time I made it to the top of the ridge, I'm huffing. The first light's here. I didn't stop moving until the full light was out. I've never heard it again in the woods since then, and I've never had a smell like that before. I honestly have no idea what the hell that sound was, or what could have been strong enough to make it. A few years ago, when I was 17, I just graduated from high school and got my first job at a Christian camp near Yosemite in California over the summer. Mainly the people I worked with were great and really sweet Christian college kids, the good kinds. There was one guy though, I would say he's Carl. I didn't frankly like him. He was tall, handsome, charming, had golden curly brown hair and a smile that could stop your heart. His eyes though, they're dead. He never got those little crinkles in the corner of his eyes when he smiled, which suggests that it's not a real smile. It was like the top half of his face died. There were things I did not like about Carl off the bat. His eyes for one, the dead of his smile. He never asked for anything. He tried to twist your arm. He just very softly, very slowly tried to manipulate the situation to feel as though you owed him. Each time, it felt like a part of my brain shut down, like a slamming door, almost like I'm powerless to say no. I get along with most of the little cliques of the camp. No one really dislikes each other. As far as I knew, we just kind of broke off into groups based off what we like into our free time, or who we like the most. Carl, though, seemed to make friends one-on-one with a clique. By the time he left the group, it was desolate. They were fighting, not speaking or trusting each other. I know this isn't a lot of evidence, but I'm trying to take a good picture mentally and describe it to you. Now one day, everyone in the camp decided to go friendzone. We tried out a lot of camp food and wanted real dinner, maybe seeing a movie or go bowling. I was off work last. Now, at camp, we had a sign out sheet. Being so close to Yosemite, we often went hiking, so if we had left, we put our name down along with where we're going, when we left and where we should be back, and when. This way, if anything happens, the search teams know where to go. So I put all my info into this sheet and head down to the parking lot. My friends had all divided up into their cars, and I jokingly asked if they forgot about me. They said Carl had said I could ride with him. I look around and I don't see Carl, although I seen his name on the sheet. All of the hair on my body stood on end. I was terrified to get in the car with this guy alone. He felt so wrong, just off, just not right. I don't know how else to say it. My friends were telling me I have nothing to worry about and everything's gonna be fine. I saw Carl walking towards the parking lot with that dead smile on his face, and everything in me was seeming to get scared. I said that I was tired and wanted to stay in tonight, and Carl laid the charm trick on me, telling me what a night it's gonna be. I owed him because of God knows what, with this dead smirk on his face. I refuse. He gets mad. Told me I don't need to be such a horrible person. Finally, everyone figured out that I wouldn't be persuaded. I hugged one of my girlfriends goodbye, whispering in my ear not to ride with Carl back. When they all left, I walked back to the area with the sign out sheets to cross off my name, since obviously I wasn't going anywhere. I saw the sheet, saw where my name was, and my heart dropped. My name had already been erased. Where I live in college, I have to come back a long way to get to home. It's literally states away, so I'm used to driving for hours on my own. This is often through heavily forested roads, with little to no other cars on the journey. Now I don't mind, I just play some podcasts and really enjoy my time normally. However, one night would change that forever for me. So it was the end of semester, and I was ready to set off like normal, and I check my phone and I have a text off my mum. It says, "Be careful." I don't know why I have a really weird feeling about tonight. I laugh about it and think, yeah, she's always paranoid like that, and set off at around 10 at night. I should be home by about 5 in the morning, that means, so I can get in, sleep and enjoy the day with my family. So I set off and all feels normal. I've got my music playing and I'm having a good time. Now I don't know why, I suddenly have this weird feeling come across me. I notice that my radio starts to act up too. Not like normal interference though that I've ever heard before. This is almost like it's being jammed. I just laugh and quickly switch my phone to podcast mode. Aliens are not going to stop me today, I laugh to myself, and I continue onwards. Now as I'm driving, I haven't seen one other car yet, but lo and behold, there's some kind of light as I'm approaching a bend. I slow down thinking it's another car, making sure I don't have an accident, but it doesn't seem to move. I think this is odd. As I get closer, I realise that it's just a torch that's been placed on the side of the road. It's as though a person's just put it there to look like a car's headlights. I think that's really odd, but decide to keep going thinking maybe a road worker left it there by accident. I don't know, it could happen. Now as I'm driving, I switch the radio again to get a weather update, and I realise that the same jamming type thing is in place. I really don't want to worry myself and think I'm just being paranoid, so I press on. Now that's when I see the same thing up ahead again, except there's two. What giving it away is that one was dimmer than the other, but it was the same orange type of glow that the torch had from before. I'm certain that it's just going to be some road workers doing something, so I decide to slow down and roll my window down to let them know that they've left a torch on up the road and it might be dangerous to other drivers. As I do so, I see some people in high-vis jackets. When I'm slowing down though, I have a horrible feeling that something isn't right. My car slowly comes to a stop, and I decide to put my full beams on. I know some of you are gonna moan at me for this, but I didn't care about temporarily blinding someone to see what was going on. That's when I see it. There's 5 people wearing high-vis jackets, but something looks off about this. I can see that the people in the background are wearing all black and a high-vis jacket. That just isn't right. I'm confused as to what's going on. Why on earth would they wear all black and a high-vis jacket? It's almost like they're not actual road workers, but the two at the front are. I call out and say, "Hello, are you guys from the government?" And there's no reply. As I'm waiting there, a horrifying grin comes across one of the workers' faces. As my eyes have adjusted to the darkness, I can see that there's more lights in the background. And I can see that the torches have been placed there just the same as before. Then suddenly, I can hear the sound of rustling around me. To my left, I can see that there's a group of people coming from the tree line. And, almost on cue, my headlights go back to normal mode automatically and I can't see the guys in front of me. Just as it goes off though, it gives one flash of light and I can see that the people in the trees are carrying a lead pipe and other objects. This is the most scared that I've ever been in my life, and my fight or flight kicks in. I desperately jam my car into reverse and floor it, panicking not knowing what to do. As I do so, it illuminates the silhouettes of at least 8 other people on the left side of me, waiting, coming to the tree line. As I'm reversing out of there, to my horror, they all come into the road and just stop, staring at me, all dressed in black. What's worse is that as I'm screaming, the light suddenly goes off from the torches and I can't see them any longer. I immediately do the quickest U-turn of my life, and start heading in the opposite direction. I'm trying to get through to the police, but I've got no signal. I speed the rest of the way home. In a terrified state, I'm crying to my mum. I don't know if they'd followed me or what. I made damn sure to get out of there as quick as I possibly could. I then file a police report. The worst thing? My mum doesn't believe me about any of this. She thinks it was just sleep-induced hallucinations, and that I was so tired I imagined all of it. That was about to change though when the police arrived, and they told me and my mum that they were so thankful for the report, and they've been tracking down a group of people who pretended to be road workers to then try and kidnap people. Apparently someone else nearly got caught earlier in the week, but sped away too when they tried to grab her. It just makes me sick to think that there's people like that out there in the world. But the fact that I was miles into deep forest with no one around to help if I needed it then. It was only God's grace that I spotted them and didn't actually get out. About a month ago, I moved into a house near the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. It's very secluded. Everything was great up until about a week ago, when this strange thing started happening. Not like paranormal, just strange. So I knew moving in, I'm gonna have about an acre to myself, which is nice. The acre itself is just about all thick dense woods. Towards the back you can't even go any deeper because the land is too rigid and the trees block a clear path into anything. Now I live alone in this tiny home. My brother and his dog are moving in a couple of weeks. The house is pretty small. It also has a basement with a sliding door to the backyard, which has a tiny little fence that can be knocked down completely if someone's trying to get over it. I decided that I was going to start fixing it up until my brother's dog becomes well trained. Now this is when the first creepy thing happened. I left to go to Lowe's just to buy one classic lump of wood for a fence, just enough to make sure a dog can't get his head over it or leap past it. Now as I was coming back home, I noticed a man on my doorstep. Looking inside through my window, even though any person could have heard me pulling into the driveway, he doesn't flinch at all, even when I slam the door shut. Eventually at this point, I kind of uneasily said, can I help you? To which he replied, I'm just your neighbour and saying hello. I went out of my way to put the wood I was carrying in my hand down on the ground and went to shake his hand, and he didn't move again. He just stared at me. After this weird encounter, I was more just done with him, so I said that I'm very busy and I'm fixing my fence and it's nice to meet him. He stayed at the front of my house though for about another 2 minutes, watching me put all my wood inside the living room, looking into and around my house in the process. I'm thoroughly creeped out now. I just closed the door in his face and went about my business. About 2 days later, into fixing my fence, another woman, this one looking nicer and having put a little appearance into her look, greeted me kindly, telling me about herself. I'll call her Miss H. Now she started to talk to me, explaining how people don't normally move around here, and I was the first in about 11 years. She went on to explain the rest of my neighbourhood, whom I knew are around the same age as her, like to stay to themselves. After a pleasant talk with Miss H, I asked her, what's up with the guy that I saw earlier? She said that, well, he's about 6 foot, which you probably know. Old, but not too old. Probably mid-50s and brown eyes, decent shave and grey hair. Miss H went on to explain that the person who lived here before me was a widow, and her teenage daughter, who was homeschooled, had left because this perv started to stalk her. She got on to say other things about this weird man, and eventually left it at that. Now last night, I thought I heard a tapping on my window at exactly 2:37 AM. I knew this because I looked at my clock. Now my window is a good 4 feet above the actual ground, and below it, I think it's just a figure of a bird or something, and maybe it's casted its shadow trying to get in. But no less than 2 minutes after silence, the tapping become 3 loud bangs. I immediately ran to the closet, grabbed my hunting .22 and hid under my bed. Peeking over, I see a figure looking in. After being scared for my life, I hear the familiar voice of the perv shouting, "I need your help." Not knowing what to do with myself, I threw my curtain open, and the only thing between his forehead and my .22 was a ½ inch of my glass. He didn't say a word. Not "don't shoot me," not "I need help," not "oh hey." He then pointed behind him to the fence. I then ran outside to see what he wanted. I still have the gun on me. I said, "What's wrong?" He said nothing, pointing to my fence. I look over, and this time I saw the fence had seemed to have been run over by a car, with mud tracks everywhere. How on earth had I not heard this? I look at the 50-something-year-old cars, of whom were dirty tire tracks that could have left this. I'm annoyed at what I saw and yell, "What the hell?" And then pull my finger on the trigger when he finally replied, "That's your fence, isn't it?" Jumped in his car and quickly sped off. It's currently 3 PM on March 2nd, and I've scraped the entire fence idea out of sheer exhaustion and fear. This is really happening right now, and I'm really not sure what to do. What I'm about to tell you happened 2 days ago in southwest Sweden. It was around 5 PM in the afternoon, and I decided to meet up with one of my friends. We have moped scooters, and drove to the grocery store to get a snack for our small trip. After that, we head towards a beautiful sheep pasture that I had been to once and wanted to go to again. It's located maybe 15 minutes away from the centre of town. After a while, we come to a narrow road surrounded by a forest, since it rarely drives any kind of vehicles out there. I started to drive in the middle of the road, and sometimes even on the part of the road for approaching cars. One time, when I looked in my mirror, I saw my friend driving close to the edge. At first, I thought she was making a point that I should keep on my part. But then, she drove even closer to the edge, almost going in a ditch. I stop and wait for her to catch up. We're both kind of laughing, and I ask her what happened, and she said, "I got distracted by something weird by a tree and forgot the turn." We laugh and continue. Later, when we sat in the sheep pasture eating our snacks, we started talking about it again for some reason. I asked what she saw, and she described it as some kind of wooden plank that was nailed to a tree, and that it looks like a figure, person with just holes as eyes. My reaction was, "Oh yeah, really?" And we decided to relocate it on the way home. We stopped by the roads and I turn off the engine. When I look up, I spotted it right away. It was hanging in a tree, looking dead. Now, I immediately think of some cults that are known to operate in the area. Maybe they were worshipping this. I don't know. I have a picture saved on my phone of this, and I'm really thinking of reporting it to the authorities. Something just doesn't feel right about it though. I have a horrible sense of evil when I look at this. I hope nothing too bad's happened here. I even got told that this could be a grave for something, as part of some of the sacrificial rituals that can take place there. I'm not really willing to go back to find out though.